breaking free.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
So here's a key for the arrows that are located within the Nephron diagram. The purple arrow stands for glucose reabsorption, the blue arrow stands for water reabsorption, the brown arrow stands for selected ion reabsorption, the pink arrow stands for substances secreted, and the black arrows just show the general direction of urine or filtrate within the nephron. In the process of creating urine, it all starts when the blood enters through the renal artery and the afferent arteriole into the glomerulus. So during the process of filtration, the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule are the main structures involved. So about 1/5 of the blood that enters the glomerulus is filtered and it passes on to the Bowman's capsule. So about 1/5 of the blood that enters the glomerulus is filtered and it passes on to the Bowman's capsule. So the filtrate is composed of a variety of ions such as potassium, sodium, calcium, hydrogen, bicarbonate ions. It's also composed of glucose, water, amino acids, but it should never be composed of protein or larger molecules such as red blood cells. So convoluted tubule. So the function of the proximal convoluted tubule is to reabsorb the ions that the body does not want to lose, and also water. We can see that water plays a large role in reabsorption throughout the whole process. So the proximal convoluted tubule may reabsorb ions such as potassium, bicarbonate, calcium, sodium, and as well as amino acids, glucose, and water. Again, the ones that I mentioned earlier. So then once we enter the loop of Henle, we go to the descending limb. So the function of the descending limb is to reabsorb water by mode of diffusion, which we will see why that happens later. So then from the descending loop of Henle, we go up to the ascending loop of Henle, and the function of this is to reabsorb ions through active transport, which utilizes ATP, and we'll see why that pairs with the reabsorption of water by diffusion. So in the ascending loop of Henle, again, potassium ions, calcium, and sodium ions are reabsorbed here by active transport. Okay, so if we go back to the descending loop of Henle, there's some things outside of it, such as the interstitium. It's basically the tissue surrounding the loop of Henle, and this tissue increases hypertonicity and it helps in water absorption. So in the descending loop of Henle, the filtrate is hypotonic, meaning there are more solutes inside the filtrate than outside. And the interstitium is hypertonic, which means the water will flow from a natural concentration gradient, a higher concentration to a lower concentration, therefore reabsorbing water. And it also helps that the descending loop of Henle is only permeable to water, so only water can be reabsorbed here. And then as we go to the ascending loop of Henle, ions are reabsorbed, right? So it's only permeable to ions. And this helps it because it makes the outside hypertonic. So it also aids in water reabsorption. It helps the concentration gradient. And it also makes the renal medulla in a way kind of salty and hypertonic if we're talking about osmosis. And the filtrate inside would also be hypertonic. And that is why the descending loop of Henle is very long to give it more time, to give water more time to be reabsorbed in, and for the ions to make the outside more hypertonic. So if we go on to the distal convoluted tubule, we go back into the renal cortex. So all these parts, the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, distal convoluted tubule are all located in the renal cortex, and then the loop of Henle dips down once again into the renal medulla. And that happens for the reason of making the medulla more salty in a way by pumping out sodium ions. So moving on to the distal convoluted tubule, the function is to again reabsorb ions and retain water always, but some secretion also occurs here. So we can see that the distal convoluted tubule secretes potassium ions and reabsorbs sodium ions, and this helps in the regulation of those ions. And it also reabsorbs calcium, and it also secretes and reabsorbs hydrogen ions. But the main ones would definitely be potassium and sodium ions. And then we can hear it moves to the collecting duct, which main function is to secrete, but it can also be to reabsorb depending on the hormone regulation and the endocrine system. So the function of the collecting duct is to collect urine from other distal convoluted tubules of other nephrons as well. All the urine comes through here, and we can finally call it urine because it is concentrated enough in this area of the nephron. So calcium ions, sodium ions, water can be reabsorbed here depending on how much ADH is released, which is the antidiuretic hormone, which stimulates more water conservation in the kidney. So, but for the most part, the collecting duct and the distal convoluted tubule are more hormone regulated. And then the urine would just go out from the collecting duct, which dips back into the renal medulla, and it goes into the renal pelvis like a filter. Any hormones that are released into the nephron, but here are 4 of them. Antidiuretic hormone, also known as ADH, and then we also have aldosterone, we have atrial natriuretic peptide, and then we have parathyroid hormone. So starting with the ADH, it is produced in the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland. The role is to conserve water by telling the kidneys to retain more water in the nephron, and the receptors can be found in the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. And then for aldosterone, it is produced in the cortex of the adrenal glands, which are just above the kidneys. The role is to regulate sodium reabsorption and the secretion of potassium. It can also control water reabsorption and indirectly maintains pH and electrolyte levels. So it mainly acts on the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. And then we have the atrial natriuretic peptide that is produced in the myocytes of the heart atria and released from the heart as well. Its role is to increase GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate, also to decrease sodium reabsorption and inhibit renin secretion. And it mainly acts on the collecting duct. In addition to that, its role is to basically lower blood pressure, and it is released in response to an atrial stretch, which is basically increased blood volume. And then we move on to the parathyroid hormone. It is produced and secreted from the parathyroid glands. Its role is to regulate calcium levels in the blood by blocking the reabsorption of phosphate in the proximal convoluted tubule. And it also promotes calcium reabsorption in the ascending limb of the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct.
Alcohol can affect the function of the nephron in the kidney. So the consumption of alcohol inhibits the production and release of ADH, which means the kidneys cannot be stimulated to conserve more water. and this causes the nephron to reabsorb less water, and then the body will show symptoms of dehydration as most of the water will be excreted in the urine.